Hello everyone and welcome to this Pi Chat Live. My name's Nick Cuthbert and I'm delighted to be joined today by Chris Morling, who is the CEO and founder of Studee.com. Hi Chris.
Hi, afternoon. Pleasure to be here, Nick.
It's fantastic to have you here. I want to congratulate you on the launch of Studee.com. It must have been a pretty busy month for you, if not last few years, but hang on, we'll get to that though. So first I better say welcome to everybody, and I can see people are commenting on the side here where everybody's from. This is a live webinar, so please join in. We really appreciate your comments. If you want to ask Chris a formal question, you can do so using the Ask a Question tab, which is at the bottom of the screen, and we can go through those questions later in the session. So Chris, I've been really excited about talking to you today, and I think a lot of people have, looking at the audience numbers here. So I think that's a lot to do with the fact you are a new name in international education. You've a serial entrepreneur and you've come into the industry. So first of all, could you just describe a little bit about your background, about your knowledge and the projects you've worked on?
Yeah, of course. No problem at all. I'll keep this brief, Nick, don't worry. So my original background for 10 years was in development. So that's given me a bit of sort of technical knowledge and background. I kicked off my first business with lots of different websites, a lot of them financial, but then we had a mum's portal, we had a florist comparison and so on. So I think that's where my comparison genes come in. And then we consolidated lots of the websites into one, which we called aboutyourmoney.co.uk. That then became money.co.uk, which was a comparison site for 60 different types of financial products. I sold that 5 years ago, and then started Studee with a friend of mine. But I've also been director of several companies, several comparison sites. One for electricals, one for bizarrely arranging your motorbike license. I've been on exec roles in the past, angel investor, and a little bit cheeky, but I've got a property development company in Ibiza, which means I can tell my wife I've got to go out to the sun for work every now and again. So that's a brief summary.
I like that. That's a strategic business in the portfolio there.
Yeah.
So we called this session, how far behind other sectors is higher education in codifying the customer journey, and what can we learn from other industries? I mean, a brief overview here. How far behind do you think the sector is? And tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing building Studee.com.
So, I mean, it's hard to put a figure on it, but I would say roughly 3 to 5 years, maybe. I think there's definitely going to be catch up, especially with these new tools coming out. There's a lot of synergy in certain areas. I mean, I'll take a classic, mortgages online. So, at first glance, mortgages online, the admissions process don't seem to be that similar, but they are actually incredibly closely linked, and you can learn a lot from this sector. So, you know, it's a big life commitment. I mean, financially, getting a mortgage is even more of a commitment financially than studying abroad. It's complex. It's a process that people don't really understand. There's a lot of choice. You have to compare, and you need guidance, support, and reminders throughout the entire process. So have a look at some of the online mortgage sites if you want a bit of innovation and ideas. In the UK, Trussell, Habito, Molo, they're big players. Now, what they've done a great job of is what we've basically also implemented, and that is understanding what the student, or in their case, the customer journey is, and breaking it down so that you understand where a customer is at, and then what you need to do to help them at that stage they're at, and really narrowing it down to quite a kind of a fine step. I think one of the big problems that we face in our industry, which they also face in online mortgages, is the fact that there's a lack of integration between different parties. And you'd think, oh, this has been fixed by the mortgage industry. It's still a problem, and it's a problem that faces us. So in the ideal world, somebody would come on to Studee, they give us the information, and then we would work with the university, have some kind of API, a technical integration that made that seamless, and they can continue their journey. That's not possible at the moment because not enough universities have APIs, and or they don't have the resources to be able to integrate. Completely understandable. So we have to find workarounds. It's why our solution at Studee doesn't require any integration. And we basically layer our technology on top of a university's application form on their website. So we don't manually type the stuff in, but we utilize what's there to minimize the effort of the university. But ultimately, it's the level of detail that other sectors have gone to personalize the journey that's the difference.
Yeah, so someone's agreeing with you here about mortgages and online financial products. And I mean, I've always wondered why some of the technology that exists in, say, fintech with Know Your Customer, or comparison sites on product knowledge and comparison, and even e-commerce and kind of the customer buying journey, why some of that technology hasn't come over. But I guess, like you say, it's possibly that the integration with the universities isn't possible, and also the level of information that they're providing on the websites is limited, and so not as easily kind of comparable or on a kind of standard platform. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's another issue that I'm sure everybody on this webinar is going to recognize, and that's the lack of resources, right? I mean, we're very lucky at Studee in that everything we do is focused on the one goal of making this process super slick, and we can invest all our time, effort, and money on that problem. Universities are way more complex, and there's going to be numerous people on this webinar who are either working on their own or working in a small team and simply don't have the resources to implement an all singing, all dancing solution. And I think that's held things up. I mean, I don't believe for 1 minute people don't have the aspiration to improve what they're doing. They're often held up because the budget's not there, or they don't have the right skills in the team at this point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've written quite a lot about the EdTech explosion in education, the investment that came in. But during the pandemic, you know, there was lots of technology solutions to support students and support their learning, but also in recruitment terms. But there are still quite a few people that feel that the correct counselling of a student, the correct the correct support around product knowledge, course knowledge, what's right, should be face-to-face and should be a kind of personal thing rather than a digital solution. And also that families and students looking to invest the kind of money that they need to in an educational experience wouldn't do that online. But how do you feel about that? You're talking about, in other industries, very high-value products, big buying decisions that are done completely on a digital platform.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the proof's in the pudding with online mortgages. But just to take a step back, I think there's this misconception that automation means lack of personalization.
Yeah.
And I couldn't disagree more. And I'll explain why. I think badly done automation results in low levels of personalization and a bad experience. But if you do automation well, I think it can be better. I think you can provide more information more often than you can with a manual process. Now, that doesn't mean that manual intervention isn't relevant. You know, we have a human team, our amazing team in Ecuador, who speak to students, but the skill is identifying when it's relevant and appropriate to speak to students or have a personal communication, and when it should be automated. Clearly, if a student comes to you with a problem that requires empathy, you're going to have a personal discussion with them and treat that appropriately. That shouldn't be automated. If they're asking a really nuanced question, again, you probably don't have the tools to answer that in an automated fashion. So manual intervention is appropriate. But if you're reminding people, providing them with the information that you've already got, these are all things that should be readily available. And you have to ask the question, what value am I adding by doing this manually compared to automating it? And that's the key thing to bear in mind. And of course, you're right, some individuals will always want to speak to somebody face to face and see the whites of their eyes. We know there are cultures like this. India, China, very much lean towards this way of being. But that doesn't mean there aren't a lot of other students who are more than happy to transact online. So if you can provide some halfway where you can take a lot of the heavy lifting off of your team by automating, but also have the human support for those who need it or want it, that's the ideal place to be.
Yeah. Okay, so when we were talking in the green room before, you talked about 120 different touch points in the process that you've come to with Studee.com. But actually, before we get onto that, I'm just going to remind the audience again, please ask a question for Chris. We're so lucky to have this time with him. Chris, you were once dubbed Britain's best boss. Is that right? By the media. Where did that come from?
Our last office used to be a castle in Cirencester. It's actually a barracks, but it actually looks like a castle. We renovated it to the nth degree and made it one of the top 10 offices to be in the world. I think it was partly that. Every year I would take the team away on holiday for a long weekend. I think. To
Ibiza?
We didn't go to Ibiza. We've been to New York, Florida, all around Europe. Yeah.
Fantastic. A castle for an office. Brilliant. Okay, so this 120 point process, yes. I mean, that sounds incredibly complex. I think most people would have it down to about 30 key touch points, 3 or 4 moments of truth in terms of the big moments when a customer or a student engages with you. But tell us more about what you've mapped out here.
So yes, we're 120 different touch points and over 100 personalized emails. So I think you've blown our cover, Nick. We are truly geeks at Studee. So let's take a step back and go, why have we done this? So we know that every country's got nuances in terms of the admissions process. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but I probably should say that universities have nuances. I think it's fair to say every university has its own way of doing things. And for us, that's a problem because we need to make sure that what we offer is in sync with what a university offers. So we've had to go to the nth degree to ensure that we can always effectively mimic the journey that a student experiences with the university. We don't want them having 2 different experiences. So whatever they experience with the university, we'll enhance that. So we wanted our service to be tailored for every single student. So what we've done is we've analysed the student journey into several stages. And then every stage is then broken down further so we understand exactly where it is and who it's with. So for example, just give an example. If we at the stage of assessing the student's application, so the application may start off being ready for assessment. Okay, it's being assessed. It's being resolved. We're liaising with the student to try and understand some of the information that might be missing from their or incorrect in their application form. It's passed, it's failed. So by understanding exactly where it's at, we only need to jump in when it's relevant. And we don't need to chase because the system will chase for us. So, and then off the back of that, so all these stages and steps, we have emails that get triggered depending on what happens. So think of all these steps and stages, potential emails, and then, just to add actually, Nick, that I don't think that's complex. I think it's involved and it's detailed, but it's not complicated. A lot of CRM systems will do this for you. The trick is in sitting down with your team and working out what they are and plugging them in. That's the laborious bit, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's complex. And then what we do to make it more complex is we have 150 data points in our system. And depending on the values of those data points, whether they're dates or flags or whatever, that's going to determine what emails get sent to the students at what stage, and also what the students see in those emails. So again, just to give you a very simple example, I'm sure loads of people are doing this, but if you've got a deadline that's looming, then you want an automated email that goes out X weeks before that deadline, just a nudge and say, look, this is the deadline. You've got to get your application completed by this. If you're stuck, this is how we can help you. But there's no need for anybody to send that manually. It adds no value for anyone.
Yeah. So this is what excites me about Studee.com, because lots of universities will have quite complex CRM systems and big investments in their own CRMs. But as you say, there is the investment that's needed in nurturing that, in building in all the kind of dynamic communications and all the rules and those sorts of things. And a lot of universities don't have the resource to do that. So they can only take it so far. And so, their customer journey is quite limited in some respects. And I'm not aware of any independent application platform that is B2C, so straight between the student as a customer and an application that reaches the kind of quite high level dynamic communication and user experience that you are talking about. There are lots of platforms around kind of agency applications and things like this, but the purest idea of a good digital application journey for a student, and it should be said that Studee covers courses from all over the world and students from all over the world. It's not UK specific, is it?
100%, yeah. 29 countries we work with universities in, and yeah, students from I say anywhere. We all know a few exceptions, but yes, all around the world.
So I just think a lot of people will be watching you and watching Studee.com to see how this experience feels and how it evolves. How have you found you launched 2 weeks ago? I know you were at the Pi Live with us. Lots of people were interested. How's it going so far?
Wonderful. It's so we soft launched a few weeks before the Pi. And we basically switched the process on. And just to let everybody make you aware, we were doing this before our new system was put in place. But it's been very manual, like a lot of education agents. Yeah. So we've been on the phone, we've been email, WhatsApp, so we understand how it works. But since we turned the switch, if you like, we've had a lot of applications come in, and excitingly, even though we've been only live a few weeks, we've had our first offer come in for a student, which is not bad for a few weeks. So yeah, it's working, and we're really, really excited. But it's just a start, right? I mean, our roadmap is colossal, and we're just scratching the surface. We're really going to take this to the next level over the next couple of years.
Well, I guess it's a continual thing, like developing, learning, testing, growing again. And congratulations on the student offer. Yeah. Okay, so for our audience watching, I always try and kind of offer some value, something that they can take away themselves. Obviously, if they want to get in touch with Studee.com, there is the button here, and we can cover at the end how people can contact you and the way you work with universities. But in terms of recruitment and marketing professionals and admissions professionals, a lot of them will be working in kind of silos, in departments. And so therefore they will be feeling that their influence on digital systems and digital integration is quite limited. It's, the bigger picture is beyond their kind of capabilities in some aspects. So are there any kind of tips and tricks we can give about what people can influence from these different roles?
Sure, yeah. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, Nick, in that this is probably one of the biggest frustrations I think universities have. As I said before, there's a desire and the understanding of where to go and what service could be offered, but the lack of resource. I think before we talk about the tech, I think my starting point was truly understanding what your student journey looks like. Even if you set up the journey in some respects and you're managing the team, go through the process yourself, because you will discover some shockers. I guarantee it. You'll get to somewhere in the process and you'll think, oh my God, how does the student actually get through this bit? This is painful.
Yeah.
Right. So it's mapping out exactly what the student does, identifying any potential problem areas. Now, if you don't currently have the data available to be able to pinpoint and go, yeah, we know specifically this is a problem area here. What you can still do is drill down and identify those areas that are painful. And then what I would suggest doing is using something like an effort impact matrix for all your ideas. So I don't know if you've come across this before, super simple. You create a 3x3 grid with effort on one axis and impact on the other, lowest to highest, and then you just rate all your ideas on that scale. So what you end up with is a 9-box grid where the top right is the easiest stuff that's going to have the biggest impact, and that allows you to prioritize. Once you've got that, then you can start looking at what solutions are available. And the starting point, if you don't have a large IT team or any IT team, is to look at what you can do out of the box. So, for example, you might be finding that communication across departments in the university is just lacking. Well, by reviewing that and putting a solution, perhaps something like Slack, you don't have in place, an instant messenger solution, is free, it doesn't get much cheaper. If you don't have something like that in place so that everybody who is working together is communicating easily, then that's number one, really. I'm a big fan of data. Everything needs to be driven by data, otherwise your decisions are blind and you are guessing. The holy grail is to bring all your data into one place. That's data from your marketing, the activity on your site, activity offline, and then your results, which can be sales, enrollments, whatever it means to you. Mm-hmm. My advice would be work towards that goal, even if it's stepping stones that's going to take you a year or two. And some of the things you can do probably straight away is look for a business intelligence tool or data management tool that will allow you to draw data in from different sources. Then what you can do is start with the data sources that you've got that you can easily integrate, and then work from there. And a bit of a tip there is that spreadsheets are often supported by everything. So a bit of a cheat can be use the systems you've got to make the data available where you can into sheets, and then use that sheet to drive another program to import the data. That way you don't have to develop an integrated solution. You don't even need the likes of Zapier, although that does help. That will automate that process for you. And then if you don't have it as a long, it's probably not a quick solution, but everyone should have a CRM. If you're not managing students in a controlled manner with some form of management system, then there's always going to be a limit to what you can do. But the thing is, not every CRM is equal, right? Some CRMs are almost list managers, all the way through to the likes of Slate, TargetX, Element 451, or more generic solutions like Salesforce, top of their game, where you can do all these things most of these things I've been describing, and you start small and you build and you grow. And you do it little by little. There's no point trying to do all this overnight.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Since I left the university and went into kind of private sector work, there are integrations for everything. Every business I work with uses Slack, and there are apps and ways around all of these things of mapping all your systems together. And there's got to be a way for universities to kind of catch up and do some of these things. Okay, I'm going to quickly go to some questions here. Someone's already given a lovely comment saying lots of takeaways already. This is very, very interesting. So I'm glad that people are enjoying it. But we have a question here for you, Chris. So it says, okay, hang on. It was this one. Okay, so if you're operating in a B2C space only, what is the value add? Sorry, it keeps moving here. What is the value add for your partner institutions, particularly when you're referencing mimicking existing applicant journeys? Is this an area where you receive pushback? Is it perceived as outsourcing it for under-resourced universities? I guess that's a really fair comment, isn't it? how are you duplicating their journey? Are you trying to take work off them? How do you see it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So several areas we add a lot of value. So at the start, our solution is more than just the application. So we help students understand what and where to study. So that's something that generally that a university wouldn't be able to help with. And for all our university partners, they are then in the mix, and we can present them to students when it's relevant. So that's number one. Number two, we provide admission-ready applications to universities. So although they're going to obviously have to do their own due diligence, check the application, our applications should be ready. They're not wasting time processing applications that are incomplete, have the wrong document that's been uploaded, etc., etc. We also, because we're communicating a lot with the students, we build up a rapport, and then that's kind of two ways in which we can kind of draw the student in. The university can draw them into the process, and we can draw them into the process. Not every university has great communication, especially between an application and an offer. We speak to a lot of unis or other agents. That can be months where the student doesn't hear a thing. We fill that gap, and we can provide that student with information about the university, keep them interested, provide them with a really useful information. And so when they get that offer, they're still front of mind and not forgotten, because we know that students often apply to many. We also add a lot of reminders and consolidated information throughout the process. So again, not every university has this nailed. They won't be providing reminders, or not as many as we do, throughout the journey. So we're there reminding the students of deadlines, where they need to go, what they need to do. And then we summarize all of the information in relevant emails along with the university. So to give you an example, the university might have a long offer letter full of really vital and key information. We then present that in a concise, bullet-pointed list of info that is a little bit easier in some cases for the student to reference. And then the icing on the cake is we've developed an email system that allows the university to communicate directly with the student, and we get copied in. That means we can do some of the heavy lifting in answering questions of the student without the university having to be involved, because we know where the student's at, what discussions they've already had. So we're basically removing some of the workload from the university and making sure that what they have is a student that is ready to study and has all the relevant documentation.
So yeah, I understand you're kind of filling the user experience gaps for the student, making the information kind of, in some cases, more understandable and kind of working in combination with the university and what they're communicating. I'd also say as well, I'm assuming this, but the online world is quite narrow. There are only certain platforms that organically draw traffic, and then universities are often competing with each other in paid ads and search ads and things like that. Whereas I'm assuming what you're building into the site is a very organic search. So it's going to draw in traffic quite naturally, as opposed to having to, pay for it in terms of a high cost per acquisition for universities.
Yeah, very much. I mean, what you see on our site at the moment is very much V1. We've already planned out the next version of the site, which will be next level. Part of my background experience is SEO and bringing people to a website. So we're leveraging all that. And what you'll see on the site in a year's time will be a very, very different beast. And we're going to be able to draw in, we're targeting 2 million targeted students a month. And just a bit of advice actually for everybody, because not everybody's necessarily aware of this. Whenever you speak to whoever it might be a competitor of ours, it might be a third party, when they start talking about their data, the number of visitors to their site, be very careful about what they mean, because a lot of visitors can be meaningless. There are several big websites in our industry where the traffic relates to the meaning of a Hindi word. it's got nothing to do with admissions and helping universities. So always dig in and ask, okay, what's your active site traffic and how do you define that?
Yeah. You can also read my article on it, which was about website traffic and bounce rates and why some sites perform very well in terms of drawing organic traffic. Okay, so I have more questions here. So how are you managing visas for international students? Is that part of your process?
It's not part of the process right now, no. We're going to be working with third parties in the future. It's not... certain countries, as everybody on this call would know, unless you're certified and accredited, you can't offer advice. I mean, Australia being one. What we can do is offer guidance, and we do that. So we explain what the process is, we help them prepare, but we don't do it in the guise of a visa advice service.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're going to be working with third parties to offer that in the future.
So you kind of signpost the process, but you don't take responsibility for the kind of success of it. Okay.
At the moment, yeah.
Will the recording be available to download after the session? Yeah, immediately after this session, it's available for download. Okay, so do you find that your team has to currently send personal messages based on students' questions, regardless of the student receiving automated messages? Or do you feel confident that the automated messages will fully answer the questions through the student, through the journey for the students? I mean, yeah, this is a big part. When we talk about admissions processing, inquiry management is usually a huge undertaking that's usually quite expensive to do. So how are you dealing with individual questions?
Yes, so no, absolutely. And that's why we have a human team still. So we always get specific questions asked. We answer them on an individual basis. But what the automation does is it gets rid of any questions that don't need to be asked. So any situation where we can provide information before being asked, that's nailed. But there's going to be change here, massive change, and very soon. We've not mentioned the buzzword yet, Nick. ChatGPT. They've announced plugins only 2 weeks ago, which are not available to everybody yet. But just with a simple plugin, you're going to be able to, using ChatGPT, query the content of a website. And so the speed with which a team can answer questions is going to be radically sped up, because however knowledgeable they are, there's always going to be nuances they're not aware of. And think about how that could be used direct to students. If students can ask questions and you can reliably answer those questions based on the data set that you control, not the web, but what you control, that's a game changer, because the student can then get instant answers to all their questions.
Yeah, and that is the big threat to Google, isn't it, and search platforms, because they list links rather than giving a complete answer that it comes from accurate information. Okay. So we've had a comment here. As a competitor of yours, I completely agree that total traffic is not relevant. Definitely, if we can quantify for university the performance we expect, yet we get asked for total traffic all the time anyway. So yeah, often people kind of misled by total overall traffic rather than quality. Somebody else, I know everybody, we've gone over a little bit, but I'm enjoying this, so we're just going to keep going for a little bit. We've got another question. Can you speak a little bit more about the email integration piece that was just referenced? Is there data that supports this as an effective conversion strategy? How are you addressing the desire of a student to speak to the institution directly versus a third party when asking questions pre or post offer?
Right, so there's a couple of questions there then. Yeah. So the first one is around how the automation piece works. What was specifically the question?
So the email integration piece that was referenced, is there data that supports this as an effective conversion strategy?
There isn't that I can put my finger on, but there will be out there 100%. I mean, email is still one of the most effective forms of communication, even for students who we know prefer other forms of communication typically. So 100%. I mean, at the end of the day, what you're doing with the email is ensuring that the student has the information they need when they need it. Simple as that. And in most cases, that's all the student cares about. You know, how they get it is somewhat secondary. So as long as it's delivering on that, that's what's important. And then Nick, sorry, the second part?
Oh, hang on, I've closed it.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Oh yeah, how are you addressing the desire of a student to speak to the institution directly, or rather than a third party?
Right. So the way our system works and the email system works is that if a university contacts the student directly, the student can reply to the university and ask a direct question. Yep. So that option is available directly. I think it's going to be a bit of a learning curve over time. You know, we're also going to be working with all our partners and understanding where we can add the most value. So whilst we're always going to let students liaise directly with the university, because I think that's the right thing to do, yep, the big question is, when is it going to be the right time for us to jump in and save the university time by answering questions asked by the student?
Okay, so I knew this was going to be popular and I knew we were going to overrun. Chris, before you go then, just tell us firstly how people get in touch with Studee.com, what kind of partnerships you're looking for, and then I'm just interested in a little bit about your future vision of this.
Okay, so I mean, if you go to Studee.com and scroll down the bottom, you'll get all the contacts you need. If you want to ask me any questions directly, feel free to email me. I'm still old school, Nick. Chris@Studee.com. Well, the next question was...
well, and you're responsive on LinkedIn as well. That's good.
Yes.
So, what I was going to say was, what's your hopes for the future? I don't mean just for Studee.com. I mean, what is the potential you see here? You've invested your own money, a lot of time here. You know, what is it that you want to get to? What's the future you envision?
I want students to have all the information that they want access to at their fingertips, so they can make a decision quickly. So that's the challenge we face. You know, every university website is a different structure, different format, provides different information, and ultimately what we're trying to do is unify that so that it makes comparison more easily available, and makes the journey from a student's perspective a little bit more uniform. I mean, ultimately, that's what we care about. We want any student who is capable of getting to university to go to university and not to be held back because they couldn't find the right answer or wasn't available of an opportunity that could be made available to them. I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, so student at the heart of it. Brilliant. Okay, Chris, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and comments. It's been a really interesting debate. And yeah, please feel free to get in touch with Chris and the Studee team after watching this. Thank you to everyone, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.